Good morning, students. Welcome all of you to this computer class. For the last couple of days, we have been learning, especially regarding the programming paradigms. We discussed there are two paradigms or two ways of writing programs. First one is the processor oriented programming, POP. Then another was the object oriented programming, that is OOP. And we have discussed regarding the processor oriented programming, its different features of the processor oriented programming and the limitations of processor oriented programming. Today we are going to learn or discuss about the object oriented programming. Okay, object oriented programming is another way or another approach in order to write program, right? So in this object oriented programming, what we do, we give more importance on the data rather than giving importance on code. Not only data, we give more importance on data as well as the functions, or we call it methods. Okay, so let us see what it is. An object can be considered as a partitioned area of computer memory that stores data and a set of operations that can access that data. That means in object oriented programming, we are giving importance on two things. One is data or the object, and the operations or the methods that are going to use those data. So let's see here, an object can be considered as a partitioned area of computer memory that stores data and a set of operations that can access that data. That means we are going to create some object and we are going to assign some data, and we are going to create some operations or the methods. Those methods can access the data. So object oriented programming is an approach that provides a way for modularizing programs by creating partition memory area for both data and functions. That means what? Object oriented programming is a way, it's a style of writing program, or it's a way of writing programs where we are going to allocate certain amount of memory in the computer, especially for data as well as for the functions. These functions are going to manipulate this data. These functions are going to use the data. That means we are going to allocate certain amount of memory for the data as well as the functions, or we call it objects. Okay, so that means object consisting of data as well as functions. We will be discussing details about objects, and now let us discuss about the little features of this object oriented programming. So in this object oriented programming, this programming is based on objects and classes. Remember, in Java, class is the base of all computation and all programming. So in Java, you're going to write program that is completely based on classes and the objects. That's why we call it is an object oriented programming. So we give more importance on objects and classes rather than the routines or functions. Okay, previously what we were doing in processor oriented programming, we were giving more stress on processors or routines, whereas in object oriented programming, we are going to give more importance on objects and classes. The design is a way of organizing a program in which the attributes and methods are wrapped together inside an object. So we will be discussing about object. Actually, object, in the object you will see two things. Every object will have two things, that is attribute or the data and methods. So what is object? You can see around yourself. Whatever you see, that is object. For example, for an instance, suppose we take a boy. boy is also an object. What are its data? The boy's name, age, height, weight, his address, his telephone numbers. All these are the attributes or the data. And what are the methods or functions? Whatever the boy does, like the boy can run, jump, swim, sing, and all other functions are called as the methods or the functions. That means in every object you will get two things, that is your attributes or the data and methods. Why these methods are there? In order to use the attributes or the data, right? So the most popular object oriented programming language is what? Java, C++, and Python. In 9th class and 10th class you will be learning only about the Java. Okay, that is a prescribed, in your prescribed syllabus you're going to learn only about the Java. So let us discuss what the object is. Okay, as just now we have discussed about the object. Object is nothing but is an example of your class. Object is what? Is an example of a particular class. So before going to this textbook, let me ask you some questions. What is object? Whatever you see around yourself, whatever is called as your objects, and definitely those objects will be belongs to a particular class. Okay, so whatever you see around yourself, maybe it's your pen, maybe your book, maybe your smartphone, maybe your television, maybe your fan, maybe your bed, sofa, whatever you see around yourself is object, right? So let us see what this object in Java. Objects in programming are just like the real world objects like humans, car, mobile phones, etc. Okay, in programming also, as you see in the real world objects like humans, cars, mobile phone, etc. In the programming also we can represent the real world into the software world objects. They also behave exactly same like the real world object. To understand and in simple terms, let's take an example of a simple object of class men. For example, suppose men is a class. Okay, if men is a class, suppose there is a man named Rahul. Let that man's name is Rahul. Fine. So Rahul has some attributes or data which represents basic information about him, like his name, his mobile number, address, and there are some functions that he performs like eating, walking, jogging, teaching, singing, etc. are the functions. So if men is the class, then each class will have what? Attributes as well as the functions or the methods. Attributes means the data. So suppose Rahul is a man, and suppose Rahul is a class or object of that particular class, man class. So what should the Rahul have the attributes? Its name, mobile number, address, all these things are the attributes of Rahul. Then what can be its method? Its method may be eating, walking, jogging, teaching, singing, etc. Okay. So in this example, Rahul is the object, and the basic information about Rahul is data of this object Rahul. Data, remember, data or attribute. Okay. And what he does are methods or functions that he performs. So in this manner, every object in the real world have some data and methods just like the objects in object-oriented paradigms. So whatever you see around yourself is an object, and remember, every object will have certain data and certain methods. Okay, so that's all about the object, and we will be discussing about class. That in my next video I will explain you about classes. Okay, so please learn what is object oriented programming, its features, and what is object. Okay, you please read this much only, and in my next video I will be explaining you about the class, and we will be discussing about the advantage of object oriented programming. Okay, wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Let's see once again what the object oriented programming is, and now let's see what an object is all about. Thank you very much.